There's a lot of different little snippets about this story that we could talk about, and we will run out of time before we get to talk about them. But one that caught my eye was that Altovise once went on a dinner date with Donald Rumsfeld.
The Donald Rumsfeld revelation was one that came early on, and I didn't necessarily believe it when I first heard it. My first interview actually was with Calvin Douglas, the person who Altovise lived with, the elderly gentleman who Altovise had lived with. And I asked him some simple questions. Who was calling her when she was here? She virtually locked herself in a room for a year and would drink vodka out of mayonnaise jars. And so he said, she'd be talking to, he's a Jamaican immigrant, he's got the accent going. And he said, which I can't do, but he said, Michael, meeting Michael Jackson, Liza Minnelli, Cosby would call, and oh yeah, the president's guy. And I was like, the president's guy? And this is 2006. So I was like, who's that? He goes, the president's guy. I was like, who? He goes, I said, which president? He goes, Bush. I said, the first Bush? He goes, no, the current Bush. I was like, who in the Bush administration was friendly with Altovise? And he goes, oh, Rumsfeld. I said, Donald Rumsfeld? And he said, yeah. I said, he was calling here? And he said, yeah. Okay, so now Calvin was in the 70s, and I'm thinking his interview's going downhill, and I didn't necessarily believe it. As it turned out, Calvin had his wits, because everything he told me was on the money. And when I went back, and again, this is early on in my research, I didn't realize at the time that Sammy had been tight with the Nixon administration, and Rumsfeld had worked for Nixon. And as I'm doing my additional research and interviews over the course of the next year, Rumsfeld's name keeps popping up. Rumsfeld was in Monte Carlo in 1974 when Sammy performed. Actually, he didn't perform. He was supposed to perform. It was an international incident. He bolted from this Red Cross benefit because he felt he had been slighted by Princess Grace. Rumsfeld's seen walking the streets that night. He had come. Rumsfeld's spotted by someone else staying at Sammy's house, at the pool house, in the late 1980s at the same time when all these other characters are staying at Sammy's house, including a whole host of mobsters. And then Brian Dello, Sammy's bodyguard, tells me that he accompanied Altovise on a dinner date with Rumsfeld soon after Sammy died. And so other people told me other things about them. And the best I could say is that they were special friends, which to me was odd only because of Altovise. I mean, you're talking about a woman who had some fatal character flaws. No one liked her. She was an alcoholic. She was a drug addict. She was involved in numerous orgies with Sammy throughout the 1970s. I could not imagine someone like Donald Rumsfeld associating with Altovise Davis.